in goodness.
Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome everyone to the training on customs and importation in the humanitarian context. We are going to wait for a couple of minutes. We're not yet on the hour to allow for people to join. Meanwhile, please feel free to introduce yourself on the chat section. We are going to wait for a couple of minutes to get started. It will be great if you can use the chat section to introduce yourself. You can tell us who you are, the organization that you're representing, and if there is anything specific that you will hope to discuss during this meeting. Great. Thanks for introducing yourself. We're very glad to have you all joining us this morning or afternoon, wherever you are. We are going to just wait one more minute and then we will get started with the presentation. Thanks everyone for joining. Well, once again, welcome. My name is Cindy Rocha and I am Airlink's Capabilities Development Manager. It will be my honor to host this training this morning or afternoon for you. Thanks for introducing yourself in the chat section. Please feel free to use the chat to ask any questions or add any comments during the presentation. This training on customs and importation in the humanitarian context is part of Airlink's initiatives to increase the overall capacity to respond to humanitarian emergencies. And we're very glad to have a very good group of NGOs represented here and some of our other stakeholders from airlines and people interested in the aviation sector in the humanitarian context. Today, we are very pleased and honored to host a very experienced speaker on this topic, Virginie Bohl. She is an international expert in devising and implementing strategies to optimize the cross-border movement of humanitarian relief aid. She worked 20 years in the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs and has extensive experience in the preparedness, response, and coordination of humanitarian response. She also has experience in information management and capacity building support to customs administrations and humanitarian organizations. She is currently the coordinator of the IMPACCT working group, and you will learn more about the IMPACCT working group and their objectives and activities during this presentation. Before we get started, I just want to mention that this training is going to be recorded and it's going to be shared as well as the presentation. Without further introduction, I will hand it over to Virginie. Virginie, please take the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for welcoming me and for inviting me to the session today. I'm very happy to see who is online. I know some of the participants, and I'm happy that I can present the work we are doing to support customs administration and humanitarian partners in disaster response. So today we will look and we will present the work of the IMPACCT working group. We will also talk about the basics of customs and importation in the humanitarian context. I will explain the documents and information quality considerations, what is important for you to know when you want to export and import goods, and there will be a Q&A session at the end, and I will answer any questions you may have. So the IMPACCT working group, I don't know how many of you know about this group. It stands for Importation and Customs Clearance Together. This group was created in 2017 during the Humanitarian Networks and Partnerships Week that is organized in Geneva each year by OCHA, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, and by the government of Switzerland. It gathers experts in different areas of work, such as civil military coordination, information management, and disaster response, preparedness, environment, but also importation and customs clearance processes to discuss with governments and humanitarian partners and the private sector what the challenges are and what are the potential solutions. So this group is composed of 10 strategic partners, such as the World Customs Organization based in Brussels, Médecins Sans Frontières, IFRC, International Humanitarian City based in Dubai, a major hub for humanitarian assistance. There is also the World Bank, Save the Children, Help Logistics that has assisted us a lot in the design of an e-learning program that I will introduce at the end of my presentation. ITU, this organization is the custodian for the temporary convention on telecommunication equipment. So when there is a need for telecommunication equipment after a disaster, they work with member states and they try to find solutions to facilitate and speed up the importation of telecommunication equipment. OCHA is also part of the group, as well as UNCTAD. As you may know, UNCTAD has implemented in more than 100 countries the ASICUDA system that is implemented in more than 100 countries in the world. This is the automated system that customs administration use for the customs declaration and customs processes. So as you can see, this group is rather big with partners that work collectively to ensure that we speak one voice, and that when we talk to member states or when we address challenges faced by humanitarian partners, we work together and speak one voice and find solution together. We are working a lot on preparedness, and we are ensuring that preparedness measures are in place to manage the importation and customs clearance processes. So preparedness measures not only for member states, they have to be prepared to receive an influx of humanitarian aid when there is an emergency. And humanitarian partners, they also have to be prepared and to know in advance what are the rules and know what the how they can manage and export and import goods. And this is one of the objectives of the session today. So what we are doing, we are advocating for the ratification of international conventions and for the adoption of national legal framework. I will go a bit more in details later in my presentation, but this is the basic. Everything that customs administration do are based on this international convention and the national legal framework. So it does not come from nowhere. It really comes from a basis, and we are working on it, and we advocate and we try to influence the custodian of these conventions to make sure it reflects the way we work as humanitarian. We also work at strengthening the collaboration and the coordination at the national level. We all know that the communication between the different ministries is not always easy. So we are convening meetings with the different partners to make sure that at the governmental level, there is a better coordination and collaboration to facilitate the importation of medicines, for example, when the Ministry of Health is fully involved, and also have regulations for that. We also work extensively on drafting standard operating procedures. When you have a national law, it is important to translate it into operational SOPs. And we work with member states and with you all as humanitarian partners to put in writing what the different steps are. We worked a lot in West Africa. I'm currently working with the International Development Bank on several countries in the Caribbean and South America. We worked as well in Madagascar, for example. So we are looking at all the disaster-prone countries and invite governments to sit down with all the partners and write SOPs that will not only help you as humanitarian actors to import goods and to know what the processes are, but also for customs officers at customs entry points. We have realized that the customs officers do not always apply the rules the same way when they are in customs entry point A or customs entry point B. So this document will also help them to apply the rules similarly in the different entry points of the country to facilitate your life as well, and that you do not say, oh, but this custom officer has requested a document that have not been requested at another entry point. So it's important to have something in writing, and we do assist member states to write these SOPs. We also, of course, advocate for the use of information technology. As I have mentioned, UNCTAD has developed ASICUDA that is implemented in more than 100 countries. And it's important to have an automated system to facilitate the importation of aid, and also the use of single window when it is possible to connect the different governmental entities. Capacity building as well. This is one of our mission. This is what we are doing today. As I have mentioned earlier, we have developed an e-learning program. I will present that later in my presentation. And we also contribute to simulation exercise when and as necessary, especially once the SOP is drafted. Then there is a need to test if these procedures that are on paper are applicable at the airport or at the seaport. And then we realize that sometimes there is a need for improvement. And then thanks to our recommendations, then we can amend the customs code or the SOPs, etc., to improve that. We also support mechanism for data and information exchange. I will address these points later, so I'm not going to mention that now in particular. So the IMPACCT Working Group has 6 strategic objectives. The first one is making sure, as I have mentioned earlier, that the international conventions reflect the way we work. So we are extensively engaged in discussions with the member states of the World Customs Organization in the revision of conventions. We have also drafted last year a high-level policy recommendation on cross-border movement. We can share through Airlink all these documents so that you are aware, but I will mention that as well, and the most important documents at the highest level that you should be aware of. Global outreach and communication. We are having and contributing very frequently to national forum or regional meetings organized by member states to advocate for the implementation of custom facilitation measures. So we all over the year do advocate for that and contribute to the discussions on behalf of the humanitarian community to make sure that it is taken into consideration. Technical and technological support. This is what I have mentioned with ASIREC and ASICUDA. Training and capacity building, I have also mentioned that. Support to disaster response efforts. when there is an emergency, when there is a big disaster, an earthquake or cyclone, then we immediately activate our network to support the humanitarian community. And we provide them through a WhatsApp group or any other mechanism, information about customs, importation and custom processes. We open a WhatsApp group, I will mention that later as well, to exchange information. In the WhatsApp group, there is the Customs Administration is invited to co-lead this group so that they can answer your questions immediately on WhatsApp so that you can get the information. Bahamas, Mozambique, etc., etc. We had very good collaboration with the Customs Administration and connection between the two worlds, the humanitarian partners and the government, to answer the questions as soon as possible. We also support more and more humanitarian partners in disease outbreaks, during disease outbreaks or complex emergencies. There is an increasing need to support you as humanitarian actors. So we do also support now humanitarian partners in CAR, in Guatemala, in Honduras, for example, and different places when there is a need to support disaster efforts. Country-specific activities all over the year. We are having discussions with governments, again, to advocate for the implementation of custom facilitation measures. I will have soon a workshop with Guatemala to discuss how best to manage the relief assistance. Honduras as well, Bahamas, Chile, Ecuador. So in your region, there are several initiatives that are ongoing, and that in the end support you and make sure that the humanitarian aid you want to import is treated as a priority, and when you can benefit from custom facilitation measures. Let's go now to the basic of customs and importation in the humanitarian context. All the list in the on the slide, I'm not going to read them, but you know them. This is the issues that you are reporting from all over the world. All the humanitarian organizations do have similar issues with importation and custom processes, so I'm not going to read them. You are fully aware of them. But there is also a lot of reports from Customs Administration and other governmental agencies. They do complain that the documentation is not in compliance with the rules, that there is even solicited donations, that the communication between the sender and the receiver is not enough and they don't share information. Sometimes there is no consignee. Consignments do not have the right labeling or in the right language, etc. So there are also from the side several remarks and complaints, and we need to work together to make sure that both will connect and find solutions together to facilitate that. The lack of preparedness affects a lot of people. They affect all of us. They affect everyone. They affect the crisis-affected people, that they don't receive the aid they need. When your containers are stuck at the border, then they don't receive the aid. Humanitarian actors, of course, and you know that very much because you are in this business. Government as well, when there is no preparedness, they realize during an emergency that they have to take decision at the last moment. They have to change the rules, they have to adapt and to adjust, whereas they don't have enough stuff, whereas their borders are closed, whereas the equipment are destroyed. So without a plan in advance to prepare for the reception of humanitarian aid, then they are also affected. Donors also, of course, they also have remarks, and they say that their funds are not used properly. They do defense to humanitarian organizations,
Airlink.
and then it is used to pay demurrage costs. Why? Because either the humanitarian partners don't know the rules and dispatch items, whereas it will not be accepted in the country, or it will be stuck because they don't follow the rules, or because the country has not accepted this. So then demurrage cost then has an impact, as you should be able to buy goods with these funds, and then instead you pay demurrage cost. So donors also complain about that. Customs administration as well, when they receive incomplete declarations, etc., etc. They are understaffed, etc. And the private sector, of course, the resumption of the commercial activities then are slower. So there is an impact on everyone. How to improve the way we work? First of all, let me remind you the guiding principles. First of all, the country has the first responsibility to respond and to coordinate the response to a disaster. This is the first responsibility they have. They have to protect their people. And the sovereignty and the integrity of the nation is also important and must be respected. This is mentioned in the Charter of the United Nations, and then you are not supposed to come in the country without the agreement from the government that you want to assist. The affected country has the primary role, as I said, initiation of the emergency. When you have an assessment to make, you know what your needs are for the affected population, and then you can ask for international assistance, and then they coordinate and implement the humanitarian assistance in the country. The humanitarian assistance should be provided in principle on the basis of the demand by the affected country. And of course, the humanitarian assistance should be provided according to the humanitarian principles that are humanity, neutrality, impartiality, and independence. And what is very important is that all importation and transaction, being for trade or being for humanitarian assistance, should be in compliance with the rules and the regulation. You cannot break the rules, and the government cannot also accept goods if they have to take a decision that will break the rule. So this is very important, that all transactions should be compliant with the recommendations made at the international level, and also the custom code at the national level. The consequences of not being compliant. Then first of all, you face delays, and then the supply chain is interrupted. Then you will have to pay fines and penalties. You will have various audits and additional audits that you should not have if you are compliant with those, because then the role of the customs administration is to control. So then if they realize that you are not compliant, then they will check what you are importing, and they are going to control everything. You also have costs that are higher than initially planned in your budget. Of course, there are delays, and you may lose the import privileges. If the custom broker has is an authorized economic operator in the country of import and do break the rules, some of the privileges they have to be treated as a priority. So non-compliance is really has high consequences on your operations and on your future operations as well. So you must ensure that you are aware of the rules and procedure before sending a shipment. I was contacted very recently by an NGO to say, we would like to assist this country, but we have experienced very long delays at the customs entry point in one country. How can I do this time? Because I lose a lot of money. It costs me a lot. And then I have contacted the customs administration and the DG of customs. I have informed him about the arrival of these containers. He has given me the procedure, and then the containers was sent to the country of import. And then it's a way to be compliant with a pre-arrival information to customs administration. Why should you have a better and sound knowledge of the importation and customs accruing processes? So compliance, as I have just mentioned, your organization will be compliant with the national rules and procedures. Your custom broker will build trust with custom administration, which is very important, as I have mentioned. You will reduce the number of inspections. You will benefit from quick clearance processes. And of course, you will serve the people in need quicker. Your goods will be released and they can work and implement your humanitarian program into the country affected by a disaster and the people in need. So it's very important to know in advance what the rules are so that you can easily import and implement the program that you want to implement in the country. What are the elements of compliance? Licenses and permits, tariff classification, valuation, and Incoterms. These are 4 elements that you need to understand and know so that you do not break the rules and then you are compliant with the rules and procedures. The problem, I'm not going to enter into details into all that, otherwise it will be too long. But what I want to highlight now is that despite all that and all these resolutions and international instruments and recommendations, very few governments are ready to receive international assistance. Either they have not ratified the international conventions, either they are not willing to receive international assistance. They may also not have disseminated SOPs. And another issue that we may face as humanitarian actors is sanctions that has a huge impact. So despite all these conventions that I have explained, then there are very few countries that can assist in that. So this is why we are working a lot in the IMPACCT working group to try to change things. And I've seen major progress and changes over the years, thanks to this working group and the contribution of all the members. The role of customs. You have to remember that custom officers at entry points are here to control. This is their role. They protect their borders. This is the role of a custom officer. So you cannot enter a country and knock at the door and say, I want to enter. They are here to control. They want to control if you are not importing counterfeited medicines, for example. They also want to control that you are not going to damage the international market. If you import too many mosquito nets, for example, or tents in a country, whereas a factory is going to resume its activities after a disaster, then they don't need that. They want to make sure that the national industry works again. So they control everything. They also control the border because of the terrorism and the new security situation that we all know. And of course, they control the collection of revenue of import duties and taxes. This is one of the major revenue they have. So if you import goods that are supposed to be taxes and you ask for tax exemption, then they will not accept that. This is a loss of money for them. So I explain to them on a regular basis that if there is no disaster, then they will not get funds from these goods because these goods will never enter the country. In normal time and in trade, of course, they have to receive taxes. But in times of emergency, these goods are because there is a need in the country and that the country cannot provide these goods to the affected population. So we need to make sure that we really understand what is the role of customs. When you take the plane, you have a control of your ID card, of your passport, of your vaccine, or all these type of things. It's the same thing for your goods. You cannot move goods without having a control from the customs administration. However, what needs to be done is that customs administration and customs officer have to prioritize and take my goods and not the goods that are going to be put on sale on the market. And they have to minimize the control. So this is what we are advocating for, to make sure that they understand that these goods should be taken as a priority, because otherwise people are dying and suffering. So this is very important. But you have to keep in mind that customs role is to control. And this word is very important: to control, control, and control. And they always talk about control when I meet with them. Regional meeting, national meetings, control is the key word. This is their work. So we need to minimize that and to make sure that they understand what we are doing and why we import these humanitarian goods. How all these controls are regulated? As I told you before, it does not come from nowhere. It is regulated by international conventions and instruments. And these international conventions are drafted by member states. Those same member states that you want to go to import goods and non-food items, medicines and medical equipment, telecommunication equipment, etc. So how it works? Quickly, you have one specific organization that is called the World Customs Organization, that is part of the IMPACCT working group, that is the voice of the international customs community. It is based in Brussels, and its mission is to enhance the effectiveness and efficiency of customs administration. So you have 183 members. The rest of the countries that are in the Pacific are managed by the Oceania Customs Organization for several Pacific islands that are not part of the World Customs Organization. So you really have these two major organizations that are the voice of the international customs community, and that we are in contact with thanks to the IMPACCT working group to advocate for what we want to get, that is a speedy clearance of our containers. I'm not going to go through all the details of this international convention. I can share with you documents. However, there are 4 international conventions that you should at least be aware and have heard once in your life, which is the revised Kyoto Convention on the simplification and harmonization on custom procedures. There is currently a revision of this convention and one specific annex on relief consignment, and we are contributing to that to make sure that it includes the new way of working. This is an old convention that has not been revised for a while, so it's important that we can input, and thanks to the IMPACCT working group and our partners, we do make proposals, and the different proposals we made have been accepted. So the new convention will be published in 2023. So there is still some work to do, but we are fully engaged, and we are contributing to this to make sure that we support your work and that member states also understand why there is a need for a speedy custom clearance of goods. There is another convention, which is the Istanbul Convention. It is on temporary admission. So please keep in mind that when you are not sure that your goods will remain in the country, that you may want to re-export these goods, then it's important to consider temporary admission and not importation. Importation, it means that you will leave the goods in the country. So if you want to distribute it to the affected people, it's fine. But if you import field hospitals, if you import water purification units that you may want to use in another country later on, then I advise you to use the temporary admission. This is a different custom regime, but it's easier for you to take it back to another country or to your home country. So keep in mind, it's easier than importation. Temporary convention, I have mentioned that. It is the custodian is the International Telecommunication Union and deals specifically with the importation of telecommunication equipment. They have just issued a new training that is online. It aims at supporting member states to draft a contingency plan on this specific topic. And you have the Trade Facilitation Agreement of the World Trade Organization that also includes provisions. For example, one of them that is important to us is the publication online of the custom procedures. We never find these procedures online. We don't know where they are. It does not exist sometimes. So they have in this agreement a provision to do that. Another provision that is important, and I will mention that later, is the non-use of custom broker. They do not recommend humanitarian partners or importers to work with custom brokers. And they say that it should not be mandatory to use this. So there are several provisions that are of interest, and I can share them with you if you are interested to discuss that further. At the national level, there are 3 documents that I want to highlight. The first one is the Custom Code. As I said earlier, this is the document that defines the legal framework at the national level. So this is the reference document that is used by all customs officers. When we were drafting SOPs in different countries, we have the person responsible for the legal department, and the first book he has open is the Custom Act. Sorry, to read and to better understand the law and to translate it into standard operating procedures. Another document that is important is the guidelines for the domestic facilitation and regulation of international disaster relief. It is a guideline that was drafted by IFRC, IPU, and OCHA. That provides guidance and recommendations to member states on how to write a new law on disaster response. And the newly recommendation number 44 on cross-border facilitation measures that address the 15 first days of an emergency when there is no electricity, no telecommunication, etc. What is a plan B that you should have in mind and have prepared in a contingency plan to receive international assistance? I will not go more into this aspect, but it's for you to have the basic information on what is the background and why it exists. So there are a lot of text and a lot of recommendations that are useful and that will serve as a basis for the development of operational procedures. So now the importation and customs clearance processes. This is very important, as you have a responsibility for the whole importation process, and you have to realize that there are 5 steps that needs to be considered when you want to import goods. The first one is the pre-shipment. Before you send a humanitarian, a container of humanitarian aid, then you have several steps and several documents to prepare. Pre-arrival is the step number 2 that I will go into details. During the shipment, what do you have to do? Upon arrival and the audit. So let's go to the step 1, which is on pre-shipment. You have a number of documents that you are most probably used to do and to prepare to export the goods from country A to country B. This is mandatory, as I've said. You cannot dispatch things without any documents. You have the pro forma invoice, the packing list, the BL, gift certificate, the custom declaration, or you do it yourself or you use a custom broker, and some documents that are specific to goods. I'm not sure it is relevant today to go into the details of what a packing list is or whatever. However, what is important is to understand why a packing list is required. Again, it is for control. The custom officer will check your packing list, and if they want to open the container, they will check whether the packing list is in line with what you have in the container. Same thing with the pro forma invoice. If the pro forma invoice has a different number of boxes or different items, then it will not go through the custom process. It will delay. So all these important, again, are important for control purposes. So I'm not going to read why the packing list. Declaration of exportation, again, it is to control the export. You have heard during the COVID that some countries have banned the exportation of several items. So then it's the same thing. They are going to control and check what you are exporting, and it is not allowed to export that, then your goods will be stuck at the border. Pro forma invoice, so I have mentioned that, not going to read. Documents specific to the type of relief items. Then you know that when you want to import medicines or telecommunication equipment or vehicles, etc., you need authorization from the governmental entity in charge of that. So you need to be prepared, and you need to know what types of documents are requested. For example, if you import prohibited medicines, sometimes you have to import morphine, and morphine is highly regulated. So you need to request the international organization whether the country is allowed to import that, in what quantity, etc., etc. So there is a long process to apply, and it is your responsibility to check the required documentation for exportation and importation. The pre-arrival information. It is important, once you have decided to dispatch items, to send the information to your partners in the country. They have to receive the information before the arrival of the goods, and then it can be also transmitted to the customs administration. Then they can pre-check whether the paperwork is okay. And when the goods arrive then in the country and on the territory, they have already checked all the paperwork and confirmed that they can release them very quickly. So it is important, through your custom broker or directly, to get the information in the country of arrival, to make sure that everything is prepared when your container is in the on the territory of the country of import. During the shipment, so you have to make sure that every shipment is documented, and you need to make sure that during the shipment all the documents are ready, and then your partner in the field or yourself in the field then needs to work and make sure that you get the right documents, so that when the container arrives, then you have all the documents ready. Well, what is important to know as well, and I'm going to address that now, is tax exemptions. Tax exemption is not automatic. You have to ask for it. It's not because it is mentioned in your pro forma invoice or any other documents that it is donated free of charge for affected people, etc., that you will get an automatic tax exemption. You have to request that. So once your goods have left the country of export, then you need to request this tax exemption certificate and initiate the customs for formalities. Nothing is automatic. You have to apply. For that. The organization and the Ministry of Finance or the Customs Administration are responsible for issuing this document. So you need to make sure that your counterpart in the country initiates the request as soon as possible, and also to select the regime. I have mentioned that earlier in my presentation. You have two different regimes, either importation, either temporary admission. And then the rules change and the tax exemption is different. If it is temporary admission, the request for tax exemption is different. So you have to understand and to know in advance what the rules are, so that you can request the right tax exemption before the arrival of your consignment. Why it exists, these waivers? Because it is internationally recommended. And you have here several international conventions that I have mentioned earlier that put in writing the different recommendations to tax exempt the relief items. I'm not going to read all that. On arrival of your containers, which is step 4, then of course you have to present the documentation to the Customs Administration. And then if you have shared these documents in advance, then there is an advance process that has been initiated, and then it is easier for them to control because they already have all the information in their office, and then they have decided in advance whether your containers will be inspected or not, and if they can release the goods immediately or not. So it's very important to initiate the process before the arrival of the consignment. The use of a custom agent, as I said, in the trade facilitation agreements, it is encouraged not to work with a custom agent. It's a choice of the humanitarian organization, either to pay for a custom agent, either to do the work themselves. Sometimes it takes hours to talk to customs agents. They don't necessarily have the skills and the knowledge of the specific procedures for the importation of humanitarian aid. So it is important to check and to analyze the cost. We are currently, and I have received a request recently to write a list of recommendations and of considerations for the use of a custom agent. So in September, we'll start drafting a document so that you can have advice and recommendations on what elements you should negotiate with a custom agent. So we'll share it with you, and Mrs. Rocha from Airlink Flight will contribute to this exercise, and then we share it with you so that you know what needs to be discussed to make sure that they do apply the rules, and that the responsibilities are clearly mentioned in the document you sign with them. Controls, what type of controls? I'm always talking about controls. I'm not a custom agent, but I know now that the keywords and the most important word is controls. You have the controls of the document. You have the control of the goods directly, and they open the container and they check if what you are sending is what you have mentioned in your documents. It is very important if there is an item that is not declared in your documents, then you break the law, and then you may be in trouble, and then you also cannot build trust if you do something wrong. So you have to be very careful with what you have in your container and what you have on your documentation. It's very important that it really match 100%. The different types of controls are also the tariff, the origin, the value, where the goods will be going. Of course, safety and public health is important, whether it means the environmental legislation, etc., etc. So you have different types of control, again, that you need to be aware in advance of an emergency. When your container is on the territory, at the airport or at the seaport, they will decide the channel for the shipment. Either it is green, either it is yellow, it is red. It is clearly mentioned in the IT system they use, as Sikuda or any other system. If it is in the green lane, then there won't be any strong control, and then the container will be released. In the yellow line, then they will check the information that is on the documents, and they will check whether you have to pay import duty and taxes. Sorry. And the red line, then this is where your containers will be controlled, open, sometimes even take some goods for sampling, etc., etc. So this is a decision of the custom officer, but it is also depends on how the customs administration trusts you as an importer or trusts the custom broker. Next step, which is also a very important one, and that is very frequently forgotten by humanitarian actors, is the documents that you have to archive for 5 years. You need to keep track of those, and if you change your job, you need to make sure that the person who will take over you has all the files in hand. If there is a control on the destination of the goods, on the documents, etc., etc., then they must be in a position to provide these documents to the customs administration. Especially if there is a process of immediate release of the goods, it means that the goods are released without control or very few control, and then they may want to check later on your documents, the final destination, etc., etc. So you really need to make sure that you keep these documents for 5 years so that they can control. Otherwise, they will ask you for penalties, for taxes, fees, etc., etc. So please make sure that you keep this document in your office. So the best practices, let's summarize quickly. You have to be compliant. You have to share the information with the Customs Administration on time, if possible, before the arrival of the container. You have to make sure that your documents are accurate and that you provide the right information. The accurate and consistent timely information determines the efficiency of the custom clearance process. As I said, it increases the credibility, and it can support the application for programs such as AEOs. The consequences of not having documentation, you know that. I'm not going to repeat. I have mentioned that earlier already. Information sharing. So the information that we are trying to get from Customs Administration and other border agencies when we open a WhatsApp group or any other mechanism are all these type of information, the procedures, the customs entry points that are open or closed, which one can receive medicines and medical equipment and has the necessary equipment for the cold supply chain, for example, etc., etc. So all this information is the one that we are compiling when there is an emergency or when humanitarian aid is needed in a country such as DRC, Ethiopia, or whatever crisis. There are so many. We open then what I said, a WhatsApp group, and then we exchange information with humanitarian partners and Customs Administration, and you are more than welcome through Mrs. Rocha to contribute and to sign up and register to this group when it is created. Last point of my presentation is the e-learning that we have developed. We have realized that all this type of information is not well known to logisticians from UN agencies or NGOs. So then we have developed an e-learning that includes 5 modules that you can read on the slide. It is much more detailed than what I have presented today. And we have just finalized the testing phase. So here we are now in the phase. We have received comments from participants and different organizations. The content itself is very much appreciated, and it shows that it is very much needed. There is a need to adjust some technical issues, a few typing mistakes, these type of things. But in September, then we will launch the course. It will be available to all of you. And once you have completed the course, if you are interested, then we will facilitate a webinar with a customs expert from UNTAD or from WCO or any other experts, then to discuss the content of the course and to ask other questions if you have any questions after the course, and strengthen your knowledge on customs and importation processes. It will be hosted on the platform of the logistic cluster, but we will share information as soon as it is available, so that you can sign in and complete the course if you are interested. This is the last slide of my presentation. Thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions or comments, I'm very happy to answer now or later if you don't have the question now, but think of it later or directly or through Cindy. And please use the chat or raise your hand. I'm going to stop sharing so that I can see there are questions in the chat. And thank you very much. You have my contact details here in the last slide, but I suppose that Mrs. Rocha will share with you the presentation so that you have my contact details if needs be after the training or during emergency or whatever. I'm happy to work with you. Thank you very much. And I'm going to take the questions.
Thank you very much, Virginie, for this very informative presentation. We do have 2 questions on the chat box. I'm going to read them to you. The first one is by Susan from World Hope International. And so she is asking about if it will be possible to include discussions regarding export marketing channels with regards to permits for equipment that will go in and out within disaster response time. She was asking these questions when you were talking about the high-level discussions. Susan, would you like to unmute yourself and elaborate more on your question to Virginie?
Yeah, it's more related to the Istanbul agreement. I would like to get a little more elaboration on that.
Okay, so so the Istanbul Convention, as I have mentioned, is on temporary admission. It means that if you want to export or import goods and want to get it back to your home country or not leave it in the country that you have imported, then you have to use this regime with customs and inform customs administration that this is how you are going to move the goods from point A to point B. So it's important to know that this regime exists. It will facilitate the movement of your goods. There are currently a lot of movement of goods from one country to another when there is too much here and not enough in another country. So it's important to use that. So exportation has been addressed since the COVID. We are more and more involved in this discussion as well due to the export bans that have been implemented by government. So yes, we do work on this as well.
Where do we get any forms or documentations to complete related to this?
I can send to Mrs. Rocha the information about this, and she can share it with you.
Okay,
Absolutely.
thank you. Okay.
Excellent. There is another question regarding the terms that are used for the mandatory documentation on pre-shipment, and it is about the gift certificate that it's required. I guess this is part of the terms that are used in Europe and the ones that are used in the United States. In the United States, this is more referred to as a letter of donation or yes, a certificate of donation, but it is the same basically.
Yeah, it is the same. It's the same. Just the language that we use. I think the gift certificate is the official word that Customs Administration use. This is why we try to stick to the vocabulary.
There you go. Do you have any other question, Kimberly, about the gift certificate or letter of donation that you would like to address to Virginie?
No, thank you. You answered the question.
Great. We have another question by Michael Brown. He is asking if there is any systematic customs valuation technique for humanitarian aid and relief. And I was mentioning to Virginie prior to this call that we get a lot of questions about the valuation of the humanitarian relief goods and if the valuation should be included in the commercial invoice or not. And I guess she already explained why it is very important to add that. But so is there something standard or systematic valuation technique that should be used for humanitarian relief?
Well, the answer to that from Customs Administration is that they want to know the exact value of the goods. First of all, for statistical results, they have on a regular basis statistics of what is entering the country, and they have to understand how much have been exempted from taxes, fees, etc. So they need this information. They even sometimes, and this is what we try to avoid and advocate against that, they ask for the original invoice of the goods. But I mentioned to them that when you are creating kits and when you have a big warehouse in Panama, for example, where you do have imported goods and create kits for a specific region, you only use 500, I don't know, toothpaste and 500, I don't know what, toothbrush, and then you have imported 2 million. So then you cannot show the original invoice because the price is wrong. So we are trying to let them understand that it is not possible to give the original invoice, but the price on the pro forma invoice should be the correct one, so that they can analyze and then put them in the statistics. So the valuation is something very important. And then you cannot put zero. You cannot put zero. This is also the answer. You have to put the real value. And if it is underestimated, and if they check the value of the goods, you may also get problems and issues at the entry points, at the export side, but also at the entry points. So this is something very, very important. It does not change the tax exemption certificate. If the goods you are importing is tax-free, then it is tax-free, whatever value of the goods is. But they really insist on having this information on the pro forma invoice. Over.
Excellent, thank you. Michael, does that answer your question, or would you like to add something?
No, I think that answers the question. Thank you.
Thank you to you.
Well, we're just coming up in 1 hour. As you know, we booked 90 minutes just to make sure there was enough time for questions and answers. So if there is an additional question, please feel free to raise your hand, type it in the chat box, however you prefer, and let's capitalize on the fact that we have all of this knowledge available on Virginie, and we really value your time, Virginie, for hosting this session for Airlink partners. It has been very informative. So I'm just going to open the floor for a last round of questions or comments that you would like to address to Virginie.
They know everything now. They have heard everything. Well, they are looking forward to having to completing the e-learning course.
Virginie, is there a question that you would like to ask to the participants now that you have this opportunity to be in touch with representatives from so many non-governmental organizations?
Oh yes, I'm very interested, first of all, to be with you today, because not necessary to have an answer today, but what is very important to us and that you should be aware of is the challenges you have. Because the more challenges we hear and we understand from humanitarian organizations, then we can advocate for facilitation measures. So we know a lot of them. But with this new situation on COVID, there are new challenges that are happening. And we are very interested, and this is what we are doing in several countries. We are having regular meetings with the logistic cluster and other partners to compile and to compare what is the current, what are the current processes of the government and what is in real life. And then we realize it is not at all the same process. And we are currently analyzing the process to Honduras. For example, there was a lot of imports for the response to IOTA and ETA last year. And then we are in contact with the government, and they have explained how good they are and what mechanism they have put in place, etc. And we have had recently a meeting with humanitarian actors. And then we have asked them to describe the procedures and the different processes and the challenges they have. And then at the next meeting that we will have in September or October with the government and humanitarian partners, then we can tell them, okay, this is not what happens in real. So of course, in a diplomatic way, but then we can explain that this is a challenge, how can it be changed? There is a country, for example, where we were in need of 7 signatures to get a tax exemption certificate. It was 6 months we had to wait for 6 months. Now it's 2 weeks. There is only 3 signatures. So step by step, we managed to advocate for facilitation measures. So I'm very happy to receive feedback from you. What is going well, what is not going well, and what are your recommendations as well? You are the expert, and you are doing this work on a daily basis, and you are confronted to all these difficult situations. So it's important for us through Mrs. Rocha to get this information and compile. We will analyze these challenges and then discuss with the government on how best to find a solution. So definitely, this is not today, but in any operations, happy to hear from your lessons learned and recommendations so that we can take action. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. And on that point, Airlink has been conducting coordination call or more of a knowledge sharing and collaboration space open for specific situations. For instance, we hosted the calls for the India response when the COVID-19 surge started. And as we were getting more requests from our partners to respond, last week, we hosted a similar session for Sub-Saharan Africa. And on Thursday, we are going to be hosting a specific session for the COVID-19 surges in Southeast Asia, because the situation in Indonesia and some of the surrounding countries is also unfortunately getting worse with regards to COVID. And the purpose of those calls is precisely to learn about the challenges from the nonprofit partners, so we can channel this information and, for instance, send it to you, share with other entities that might be able to assist and support in those facilitation measures for advocating for the overall humanitarian community. So I will invite all of our NGO partners on the call to please reach out to Airlink with this information. You have as well, Virginie, contact information there. And our hope is that we will be able to contribute to more collaborative responses.
Yes, it's very important. Africa, I'm very much interested. I'm in contact with the African Union and with ECOWAS, and then we will discuss these different aspects. My colleague from Humanitarian Logistics Association is online as well, and we have soon a call with ASEAN, and we will address all these type of things in the future. We'll see how we can strengthen our collaboration and work with them. So it's really important to get the feedback from you all so that we have, even if you already have some of them, but yours may be different from others. When you export from this continent, it may be different from when you export from Europe, for example, or any other places. So it's important to know and have all the bigger picture and all the details, and then we can address all these challenges for you, because our objective is really to assist you, to assist Customs Administration to better understand who we are, but also to assist humanitarian organizations so that they can better support and provide assistance to disaster-affected people. So yes, thank you very much.
Excellent. There is one more comment on the chat from Deepa James, who works for ADRA. And she says that she's surprised that there was a mention that customs agents are considered generally not helpful in humanitarian shipments. And I think that you didn't necessarily say that they are not helpful, but that sometimes they are not as recommended mandatory to work with, or mandatory to work with.
Some countries do. It is mandatory in some countries to work with a custom agent, and sometimes it is not necessary. I've never mentioned that it is not helpful. On the contrary, sometimes it is cost effective to work with a custom agent, because it's the process is very long, very difficult, and you don't necessarily have the staff nor the skills to deal with all these importation and custom processes. So it may be useful, so you have to make your calculation within your organization, but the World Customs Organization and the World Trade Organization say that it should not be mandatory. You should be able, as an importer, exporter or importer, to do your custom declaration yourself and to do the custom processes yourself. But I really understand that in some countries, it is very difficult to do the custom clearance alone on your own. It takes time, it's a lot of money and energy and back and forth with Customs Administration, so it's sometimes better to pay a custom agent. But this is the international recommendations, that it is not mandatory to use it, so that you have the option to do it yourself.
Okay. Deepa, would you like to add something about ADRA's experience working with customs brokers?
Yeah, sure. I feel like as you mentioned, Virginie, thank you so much for this session. I feel that we have a very small logistics team. It's basically just me doing the corporate partnerships. So in that sense, I often do rely on customs agents in other countries, and we don't work necessarily with a specific country, so I cannot know all the requirements and recommendations for importation. So we often rely on the country office themselves to support us with that, and they do often use agents, especially in Africa. And you're right, like the experience is different depending on the country, depending on the agent, and so I've always encouraged the local offices to use agents so that.
But they have to select the right one.
Right.
And this is why we are writing recommendations. And in September, we'll start writing recommendations so that you can send to them and make sure that they sign up with the right one.
Right.
I remember in one country, one humanitarian organization had used a custom broker, and he was about to pay the customs administration to release the goods and the demurrage fees, and the money was stolen from his car, and then he was unable to pay, and then the container was stuck because it was a small company with very few staff, and then the container was stuck for long because the humanitarian organization, but we paid you. You should have paid the customs administration and the port, etc. And then the money was lost, he said. Wow. So then you have to make sure that the responsibility are well discussed in advance, and try to avoid such a situation. But sometimes it's more cost-effective to work with a custom broker. I agree, but it should not be mandatory.
Sure.
This is the only recommendation.
Thank you for that clarification.
But very useful indeed, sometimes.
Thank you so much, Deepa, for adding to the conversation. And there is an additional comment in the chat by Lin Yu about Myanmar, Burma, that is requiring 6 to 9 months for import permit and tax exemption from the government. And it's very difficult for emergency situation, for emergency response. And as we know, Myanmar is currently experiencing one of those potential spikes of COVID-19 and shortages of oxygen. And we've seen increasing calls for the humanitarian community to respond to the situation in Myanmar. Is that something that you might be able to share some information as to has there anything been done to engage with the government to facilitate this process?
So Myanmar is indeed one of our target countries. We have many countries, but Myanmar is one of them. We have not initiated the compilation of the different steps, because importation permits, you have several steps to make. So it would be good to put in writing where the challenge is here. Is it an issue with the IT system? Is it an issue with the number of signature? Is it an issue with prioritization? Is it an issue with the goods that are imported? So we need to analyze that, to compile the information, to analyze, and then to decide who is the best place to address. As I have mentioned in the beginning of my presentation, we have strategic partners that have different point of entries within the government, and depending on where the challenges here is and what challenges should be addressed first to have the biggest win, then we need to analyze that first before entering in discussion with the government. So happy to hear from you. If you can put in writing all the process, I will work with the country team as well in Myanmar, and then we can discuss together how best to address these challenges, both on importation permit and on tax exemption. So let's work together on this and continue the work, and then we can try to find solutions. We cannot solve it overnight, but definitely we will discuss at least and find again who is the best place to address that.
Excellent, thank you. Would you like to add anything else, Lin, or does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes.
Excellent, thank you for asking. We have Tomas Fernandez raising his hand. Would you like to ask a question?
I would like to add something here. My name, Thomas Fernandez from the Humanitarian Logistics Association, and I'm the Southeast Asia representative. So what Lin brought up here is a very good point. The tax exemption is very different from country to country. In some countries, it must be issued before the shipment even arrives in the port. In other countries, it can only be applied for when the shipment has already arrived in the port. It takes, in some countries, takes 2 days. Then in Cambodia, it takes between 2 weeks and 2 months. Yeah, and now we learn in Myanmar from 6 to 9 months. So we want to know about it. And Virginie already mentioned that we're working together there and talking with ASEAN so that this can be unified. So please let us know. And we're actually working on this right now.
Excellent.
Yes,
Thank
it's
you.
very important. The word unify is very important. We definitely need to speak one voice and to address these challenges as a group and not as individual organizations. Then we have a bigger impact.
Yes.
Well, we're very glad to support the IMPACCT working group to get the voice and the challenges from the non-governmental organizations. I don't see any more questions on the chat. Is there any last comment or anyone that would like to address the group before we close the session? I don't see any hands raised. So I will thank everyone for staying with us for the duration of this session. Again, Virginie, thank you very much for your contribution and for all of the work that you are doing on the IMPACCT working group. We certainly look forward to get the information about the e-learning course to promote to anyone who is either in the session or for them to invite other team members to learn about this very important process. Thanks once again, and we'll be in touch. We will be sending the presentation and we will be posting the recording as well on Airlink's YouTube channel. Have a great day, everyone.